And he's on the line right now. His area includes the valley down into Ilion. Marc Butler, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. How you doing?
Technically, Ilion is Remington Arms is so much more than just the village of Ilion, right? I mean, this is the entire region. It's a leading employer.
Yes. At one point, I believe they did a study, and there are employees that come there from several surrounding counties. So we're not just talking about impacts on the village of Ilion. We're talking about something that's going to affect many people throughout the Mohawk Valley if anything goes awry there.
So here's what I'm getting. It's very interesting that I'm told that in Alabama they make parts for Alabama are made in Ilion. They're making AR-15 Bushmasters, Marlin rimfire 22 rifles, and handguns are built in Alabama. But that is that facility, though, Mark, and I think you've seen the same reports that I've seen, is by no means ramped up to what they had originally planned. It's way underperforming right now.
I think you're absolutely right. I just saw a news article within the past week. They talked about the last elements of the funding package to support the government incentives in Alabama was put in place. And again, that was a very optimistic report, and this this paves the way for the future and on and on. So I'm a little puzzled about. I thought they were at least at some degree of production in Alabama. Yeah. So and I think that gets back to my concern. I mean, corporate policies and all those things. I certainly understand our local folks are reluctant to say too much. They don't want to go against the company line. But I think as the historic home of Remington Arms for over 200 years, I'd like to see some words of reassurance or some kind of statement out of Remington Arms. Seems like every week there's some new revelation that it really sets us on edge, and I'd like to see some clarification from the big boys, whoever they now are.
Well, and here's the question for you: if you read the Wall Street Journal report. It states specifically that under this bankruptcy deal, Remington is handing the reins over to its creditors. Well, What does that mean?
Well, that is the question. I mean, that is a whole nother perspective on things when you have these outfits that come in and they're money-making entities. Suddenly the Remington brand and everything that Remington has stood for in Ilion for 200 years is kind of secondary to the primary goal of how
survival.
Can we maximize our profits, and rightfully so. I think that raises some concerns with us. I had a little chat with Mr. Luke a couple of weeks ago, and he was very optimistic about the business. As we discussed, they've been calling some people back, and he said the business is fine, despite the national hysteria that's going on now about firearms. But all of these things taken together, it's a reason for some grave concern.
Yeah, I mean, and Mark, I got to tell you, we've always heard, I grew up in a Remington family. My father worked at Remington from the point where just after I was born, all the way up through my years, and still is a gunsmith today. Worked in the custom shop, which no longer exists at Remington and Ilion, which is very sad. But you always heard rumors and doom and gloom, but we've never known to be so close to out of business as we have known Remington to be in the last couple of months. They were, without this deal, they were closing up shop.
Well, again, as I'm interpreting it, I think they did have a deal with the deficit they were running with an agreement for some equity in the company, and as I'm understanding, that deal kind of disappeared, and then they went and had to renegotiate and come up with another alternative. And so again, I just would like to see some kind of response from Remington and what that means for the Valley. I think people are rightfully very concerned at this point, and I think your assessment is accurate. I think we're about as far down that road as we've ever been, and it's very concerning.
Andrew.
And I guess we learned with the closing of stores like Toys R Us and stuff like that, you think these powerful, historic, legendary brands will stick around forever. I mean, do you think the name Remington, and just not even just Ilion, but in America, what it means, that will be enough to just keep it keep it afloat, or keep the creditors wanting to keep it alive?
Well, I absolutely think there's value in the Remington name and the Remington tradition. What concerns me as these creditors start to look things over and make decisions, I think one of the issues that they have to face is, if we're going to maximize profits, do we need multiple production facilities? Do we need multiple operations? I think they got throughout the country several various places where they manufacture products or produce products, and my concern is when they sit around that table and figure how we can make a go of this, do we get to a point where we don't need multiple places to do our production?
Right, I would think that would mean more of a risk for like a Huntsville, based on what you had said earlier, Bill. I mean, if it's between a long-standing facility like Ilion, where that they know they're all trained, they all have the equipment, and something that's new like Huntsville, it would probably make more financial sense to just.
I'm worried anytime
Shift everything back
you're
up
having
here.
bankers that are making these decisions. You got it. They care about one thing, and they do not care about history.
Right.
They care about a bottom line.
Yeah.
They're purchasing a brand.
They do not care about the core business. They care about the profit. But to compare the facilities, remember our Remington facility in Ilion is older. It's multi-story.
Yeah.
I think what they're doing in Huntsville is right out of the wrapper. And I think, some of our folks, if it ever came to that, would probably take the opportunity to move to keep their jobs. I hope we do not reach that point, and I'm not suggesting we're anywhere near that. So, sometimes when you do radio interviews, things go viral, but.
Well, listen. At the end of the day, this is a very difficult time. What do you know? What protections are there for retirees and for those that are working there? Let's say the company had gone belly up. Does everybody lose their pensions? What happens in that scenario?
Bill, I haven't even had a chance. This is all brand new news to us. I haven't had much of a chance to talk to any of my colleagues here. I would say that their pensions would have to be protected. There's got to be some kind of regulation involving that. I mean, you can't throw people out on the street.
Yeah.
But I think, again, I think we are a long, long way from having any of those kinds of discussions. And we're going to have to regroup here in Albany, reach out to Remington and see if there's anything we can do to help with the situation. So we're waiting to hear more details, and I hope they're forthcoming, but I think we need to be prepared to gear up here in Albany and locally to be sure that Remington continues to be a strong presence in the Valley.
Andrew brought up Toys R Us. I believe the investment firm that owns Remington Arms also owns Toys R Us. These are investors that come in and they buy up, and they have subsidiaries, and it's all tied back to the same company. So Remington, Toys R Us, same company when you really dig in.
Well, it's kind of similar. We just went through it, for example, with Hardin. Investors came in, and what happens, and there's some element of insecurity. You go back, remember Chicago Pneumatic. The list goes on and on. And I think that's the danger when you get these outside entities, and suddenly it's not about jobs, it's not about families, it's not about history, it's not about heritage, it's about the bottom line, it's about numbers, and that's a point of concern, I think.
All right, very interesting. And again, what is odd, though, is through all of this negativity that's out there right now in uncertain times, Remington is at a higher state than they were for most of last year when it comes to employees. The numbers are up.
And that's right. And as I said, I had a brief conversation with the plant manager. The core business is fine, despite everything that's been going on nationally in terms of the firearms industry and the concerns about firearms and what that means, where that's heading, more regulation, what's the impact going to be on business. So we're in for a real period of transition here, and we need to get together and do what we can to be sure that Remington remains where they are.
For the record, the Cerberus, which is the company that owns Remington Arms, actually put a bid in about in the last month for Toys R Us. That, if you remember, there was a story about Toys R Us thought that there's a deal that could be cut. It would keep about 60% of their American stores open. It was that company that tried to put it's a hedge fund company. That's the company that owns Remington Arms. That deal has not, at the very least, has not at this point gone through. It also might not go through. They seem to be thinking it's not going to happen. So interesting, crazy, but investors, it's a lot different than the days when even Remington was owned by DuPont. It's a completely different deal today.
Yes, it used to be a cradle to grave. You work hard for the company, and the company took care of you. Now everybody's a free agent. That's the evolution, and I'm not sure it's such a positive thing.
Marc Butler, we appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time this morning.